This is your 20-minute podcast, where we do our best to give you useful information in 20 minutes or less. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/your 20-minute podcast. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Now, here's your host, David Brower.
Welcome back to your 20-minute podcast with David Brower. Our special guest today is Francesca Kuglen. How are you today?
I'm amazing. I'm wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm fabulous. And you're in the Bay Area, and I'm in Colorado, and we both love both locations.
Oh, yes. What's not to love about Colorado, David, really?
I know, right? What's not to love about the Bay Area? It's one of my favorite places.
I know.
So you have been a busy young lady ever since you got out of college and started your first business, right?
Yes, it's been rather nonstop. And I'm sometimes, now that I'm in my 50s, I think, was that a good career move, or should I really have just taken a few years off and laid on a beach and then got to work? But, like most entrepreneurs, I'm probably a workaholic on some levels, and that's good and bad. But yeah, so whenever a vacuum opens in my life, I think, let's start another company.
Good for you. Good for you. There's no dust that, what's the saying? There's no dust that lands under your feet, I guess?
Yes, exactly.
All right. So you started several successful companies from scratch without venture capital and marketed some things through major retailers, licensing products to huge companies. So a lot of things that people sitting at home are going, I got this idea. And you've been there, done that.
Yes. And it's funny, in a 20-minute podcast, and even when I say back on the last 30 years, for example, in a like 11 words, I can make years of pain and grit and tears and blood sound so easy. Like, oh, yes, I did that. But what any entrepreneur listening has to know is that that's the typical world that we live in, which is you can't go into depth about all the agony, but there has not been one step. Okay, there's been a few steps that weren't agony, but the majority of those steps have been trial and miss, error. No matter how educated you are, no matter how many times you've been to the rodeo, you still make mistakes. The world is changing around you. So decisions that I used to make, or that anybody listening used to make, suddenly a year down the road, it might be the wrong decision. And it's baffling. But that is what the world of entrepreneurship is like.
It's not unlike technology, I would think, in so much as it just changes so rapidly.
Yes, I think that's where the line comes from. Do what you love. Now, that is a very different line from find your passion and it will financially support you. Okay, that I don't believe in. I believe that if you can make them the same, that's awesome. But the reality is sometimes to have a successful company, you're going to have to work your butt off. You are going to have to work so hard. So I tell people, at least love your business, because when all else fails and you can't pay the bills and your spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever is looking at you like you're a complete lunatic and why are you doing this to yourself, you've got to have something that gets you out of bed that motivates you. So sometimes that's different than find your passion. I mean, if I wanted to just do my passion, I think I'd be laying on a couch, binge watching and eating chocolate. Like that would be or maybe in a hammock somewhere. Okay, that would be my passion. But so far I haven't found a way that will pay me to do that. It's shocking, really, but that's the truth.
Couldn't agree with you more. If you, and I've always felt that way. I was in radio for a very long time, and now I'm an entrepreneur running my own voiceover business, and all the way through, I've never taken a job for money. I've taken a job because it looks like fun, and I can accomplish something, and then the money follows. So everything I've been very blessed in doing this voiceover gig for full time for 8 years out of my house. I'm having the time of my life, and my goal is to never have a real job ever again, because that's how I feel about the job I have.
It's so funny that you say that, because there's this great saying as well. You don't sound like this is your angst, but that entrepreneurs, you'll know you're an entrepreneur if you're willing to work 80 hours for nothing instead of working 40 hours for a paycheck for someone else. And in my family, there's 6 children in my family. I'm the oldest. And I think 5 of us are entrepreneurs, or maybe 4 of us are entrepreneurs, and 2 have entrepreneurial spirit. But my sister and I were just talking this last weekend about, she was telling me this great story about a woman who was sick of her job in corporate America, and one of her kids was getting braces, and the orthodontist mentioned that he needed to find a new company that would manufacture the what are those metal things? The retainers. And so she investigated it, bought machinery, started it up in her house, and made more money making retainers out of her garage, seriously, before she moved into an office space than she had ever made in her corporate job. And I thought, there you go.
That's awesome.
So you doing radio and doing what you love and the voiceover, that's amazing. And then you create a job around it. And suddenly you look and find everybody that wants voiceover. It's kind of a neat thing that happens with entrepreneurs.
It absolutely is. A long time ago, in fact, we were talking about, I used to live in Chico, California. And the reason I came to Colorado was I got recruited to do a .com job. And I'm going, I always have had this entrepreneurial spirit. I didn't have a family. I had a few bucks set aside. So I took a leap of faith and moved to Colorado and never looked back. I mean, it's like sometime you just got to go, let's go.
Yes. And conversely, I'm also always the voice of reason. Although, see, this is what's interesting. I agree 110% with that, because I also think that part of what stimulates success is fear. No, I'm kidding.
No, it does. Absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
When you've got it all on the line, when you have no backdoor, no trust fund, nobody's going to bail you out, there is no white knight coming on a horse. You have to get really clever really fast. You have to learn to prioritize your time, which is something that entrepreneurs are not genuinely good at.
Right.
Because everything, when you're an entrepreneur, comes at you in the same velocity that anything else. So it's like, oh, do the email or write this report that could make me $1 million. But somehow they seem like they have the same weight, which I know sounds crazy. But believe me, there's entrepreneurs out there nodding their heads going, God, I know what that feels like. And so one of the things that happens when you're under that kind of stress and you've burned all bridges is that you have to make it work. You have kids you've got to feed, you've got whatever, something that you have to do. And I honestly believe that it kicks your brain into certain creative levels that are interesting. Now, that's different than the stress that shuts you down. There's this fine line between stress and entrepreneur angst. But anyway, go ahead.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things I found, and my wife pointed out to me actually, because she's the best mirror of me that I know. And when I got fired from my corporate job, and so my last day on the job, I called her when I got fired over a cup of coffee. That was pretty special. And I walked out and I said, well, we should pray about this. And we did. And the very next day I took a leap of faith and started my voiceover gig. And that was May 1st, 2008. And ever since then, fear has certainly been a driving force, and the angst has been there. And the idea that I know I can fail somewhere along the line. And then one day the little light switch kicked on and I was just in full gear, entrepreneurship, going after it. And my wife said, I don't know what you did, man, but you faced your fears and you are just rocking it right now.
Well, and that, David, is an entire podcast about fear.
Right.
Because I personally believe, after walking this walk, knowing hundreds, possibly thousands of entrepreneurs across the world now, that fear, it's the unspoken gorilla that's like sitting on our shoulder at any given time. To the outside world, we look like we've pulled it together.
Right.
But the reality is the fear can be debilitating, and it'll manifest in things like procrastination, exhaustion. And I don't mean exhaustion because you've worked 20 hours in a row.
Right.
I mean, like all of a sudden you'll have to do something that's really important to the growth of your company or yourself. And you'll find yourself wanting to get up and go and get coffee or wander around, or suddenly it's time to clean your drawers. God forbid you cannot do that project with a messy office. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that is when it manifests in a dangerous way, because that's when what you're explaining is When you face up to that fear, when you finally figure out the way that you're going to turn and challenge it back, it dies, it goes down. There's ample neuroscience behind that. It's almost as if there's a part of our brain that senses we're about to go into danger. So it's picking up, and it doesn't know if that danger is the IRS is after you, or there's a tiger coming at you, or a person with a knife. It just senses that your fear is getting, engaged. Yeah. And its job is to protect you. That's how you've survived. So it will start doing things that have worked in the past. So one of the things I tell entrepreneurs constantly is I want you to replace what people say to you all the time, which is, if you keep falling into the same hole or you keep making the same mistake, people say to you, gee, why can't you just pick yourself up, bootstrap it, blah, blah, blah. And the bottom line is because the truth of your brain is that 96% of your gray matter is working on all levels to protect you. That's what it's done. That's what it's evolved to do. And it loves familiarity. So when you keep falling into the same hole, I want people to stop beating themselves up, because probably it's because your brain it likes that familiar thing, even if it's uncomfortable. And it would rather go there than push past a barrier. But what's amazing about the brain is once you figure out how to get over, under, or around the wall that's keeping you back of fear, you'll find exactly what you did. It dissolves. And suddenly, literally miraculous things begin to happen.
Oh my gosh, absolutely right. And fear is a major component of everything in every life. I think that I don't care if it's, going bowling with your grandson. There's fear in everything that you need to overcome at some level, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we might be you're going to tell me when we're down to
yeah, we're fine.
Okay. What I was going to say also about fear, and this is that fine line, because I love neuroscience. If I had to do it all over again, I think I'd be either an economist or a neurosurgeon, because I just freaking love the way the brain works. Nice. But one of the things that I've always found fascinating, because I'm in a creative business, is that fear shuts down your frontal lobes. That's the first place, because when your body is under tremendous stress and fear, again, it goes into the mode of, okay, survival at all means. So it doesn't need your creative centers. It needs your blood pumping. It needs adrenaline flowing. It needs your liver to change. It needs all of those things. So what it does is it begins to, and when I say shut down, it doesn't mean that you can't access it. It just means that it kind of goes on mute. You'll find that you're not able to do any creative problem solving. You're not really able to think creatively, and you think another cup of coffee is going to do it. But more times than not, it's actually stress shutting down your creative center so that the rest of you can just live through whatever the crisis is. So one of the first things, and it goes back to mental health, it also goes back to when you talked about prayer. I'm a big fan of prayer, a big fan of prayer. But what happens is when you are able to figure out what will diffuse your fear, your creative centers will come back. And that's precisely what entrepreneurs need when they have to look at a myriad of solutions. There's 400,000 things different ways they could go, and they have to be able to choose correctly. And you need your creative faculties to do that.
Boy, no kidding. I'll share one line with you. I used to bowl a lot many, many years ago, and I bowled professionally, but it was just in regional tournaments and stuff. It wasn't major. And so I got this new bowling ball, and I hired this coach, and I couldn't quite get my ball out towards the alley far enough to get into the strike zone, And so he said, David, trust is a must or your game is a bust.
Oh, I'd never heard that before.
Isn't that awesome?
Trust is a must or your game is a bust.
And so I interject life instead of game. I interject my business instead of game, right? And so I went on the next day and won my first pro tournament.
Really?
Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
So trust is a must or your game is a bust.
Wow. Well, one of your first podcasts was about gratitude.
Right.
And I think that as time goes on and there's more, we study the biochem of our brains better or more efficiently, I think we're going to find that gratitude and trust have probably the same effect on the brain, which is that I'm not going to say it lulls it. That's not what I mean. It's not like it lulls it into this place. It's that it calms it. And our brains are this incredible supercomputer that's at our fingertips if we can only let it work and access. And then it's interesting because for me, there's always the other component, which is spiritual. Some people in your audience will roll their eyes. Some people will gag. Some people go, oh, yeah, I know that. But I always say there's this great book by Julia Cameron, and she says, you can go your whole life without using math or believing in God. Absolutely, you can live your entire life without those two things. But your life's going to be a heck of a lot harder if you do. If you just want to use a little bit of math and possibly a little bit of belief, it's going to take you so much farther. And so I believe that I'm one of those rocking leftist liberals that believes that science and spirit can live at the same time in somebody's heart and brain.
No question about it. I couldn't agree more. In fact, our pastor several years ago did a sermon on that exact thing of how science and Christianity can live together. It was fascinating. I wish I had a copy of it because I'd never heard it before. It was really good.
It's one of my core beliefs. And there's something else I always tell entrepreneurs, which is, so if you don't believe you're spiritual, if you feel that you are at the last end of your rope and you are about to give up, Annie Lamott, who's a writer, wonderful writer, in the Bay Area, as a matter of fact, but she wrote in one of her books a long time ago that help me is a complete prayer. Help me is all you need to say. You don't always need to have it a certain way. It doesn't have to be flowery. You just have to call out there, help me, and give it a little bit of trust and gratitude, and amazing mountains are going to start moving.
Could not agree more. Oh my God. In fact, I even have you'll be impressed. I even have a gratitude tattoo.
Do you?
Yeah. I do. When my son was going to Afghanistan, he and I went up and got tattoos together. And of course, he got this huge Marine thing on his back. And I got a cross with a drape hanging over it and then gratitude underneath it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So is it okay to ask what part of your anatomy the tattoo is on?
My left arm, upper
Your
arm,
left arm.
right below my shoulder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That is really great. And please tell me that your son came back from Afghanistan.
He did.
And is, oh, good.
Yeah, he graduated from college. He's happily married, has a great job, and just had his first son a month ago. So we're going to see him this weekend. So that was so much fun. Oh my God, I can't even tell you.
Well, I know we went over.
I don't care.
Is that okay? Okay.
I don't care. I could care less. It was fabulous.
All right.
Until next time, don't forget to download your free audiobook at audibletrial.com/your 20-minute podcast. That's audibletrial.com/your 20-minute podcast for your free audiobook. And thanks for listening to Your 20-Minute Podcast with David Brower.